Okay, we are live.
I'd like to call this regular council meeting to order. And before we begin, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we're all gathered here throughout the community is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Mississauga, and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to reside in and contribute to the life in our community. Madam Clerk, the invocation, please.
We meet to serve our community and endeavor to be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Let us be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chamber minds that think and hearts that feel, so that in our deliberations we may display imagination, wisdom, and courage, and the will to do our work for the good of all.
Thank you. And the roll call, please.
All members of council are present, your worship, with the exception of Councillor Noyes, and R.C. Encina sends his regrets.
Thank you. Just a couple of announcements. The first relates to COVID, of course, and we've heard some very good news over the past few days with respect to the approval of the first vaccine that has come on the scene, with the likelihood and promise that there will be several others that will follow suit. However, despite the fact that the vaccine has arrived, it will take many months for all Canadians to receive the vaccinations that they will require in order for us to reach a point of stability in the society where this virus will not be the danger that it currently is. So I want to caution everyone to appreciate the fact that this is a vaccine that's on the horizon. It's not here yet, immediately available to all of us. So in the meantime, we need to continue to follow the health guidelines and do everything that we can to make sure that we are not helping to spread the virus. And in that regard, the reality is that it's taken on a whole new life. And the second wave, as had been feared and predicted by some, really is much worse than the initial wave. And even in Niagara, there were 65 new cases on Saturday, 71 new cases yesterday, 35 new cases today, and the numbers just keep growing, so that it's very, very important for people to appreciate the fact that when the public health authorities are cautioning us not to gather in large numbers, to try to limit our movements, to be cognizant of the guidelines that they've been banging away at, all of which I'm sure you all know, and I won't keep repeating because I'm sure you're tired of that, but it's very, very important for us to continue to pursue that, because until we actually get the vaccination in the arms of the majority of Canadians, this is still a terribly, terribly dangerous virus. But on a happy note, I want to say that this is the last council meeting of 2020 for this council. We're now just slightly past the halfway mark in our term. And this has been, I will say without fear of contradiction, the strangest year any council has ever had to deal with. And I want to congratulate all of the members of council, and in particular the members of staff who have done such a stellar job in managing what has been an experience of a century, and which hopefully will not be visited upon our successors for at least another century. It happens to be also the last council meeting prior to Christmas, and I want, on behalf of the members of council, to extend our best wishes for a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and a safe holiday season. And I know to all of the residents of Fort Erie, and I know that all of us are looking forward to 2021 and all of the promise that it holds for us as a community and as individuals. So again, on behalf of council, best of the season. That then there are no addenda to this meeting. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have to declare a conflict on the consent agenda item correspondence 2A. That's the SPCA Board of Director minutes, as well as under motions, item D, the new request for a new animal welfare bylaw, as the company that I work for provides contracted services to the Fort Erie SPCA.
Okay, just let me get that. That was motion. What was the number again?
Yeah, the motion was D.
Is it 10? Is that item 11?
Oh, sorry, item 12D, my apologies, was the motion.
Yep.
And consent agenda item It would be
2A.
under, yeah, 2A.
Okay. Any others? And Madam Clerk, I'm going to declare pecuniary interest with respect to the minutes of the Community Gaming and Development Corporation, item 9.2.3D, because there are a number of recipients of allocations that I represent, although some pro bono, they presumably are relying upon my legal advice. So I've asked Councillor Zanko to take the chair when we get to that particular item. Are there any other declarations of pecuniary interest? If there are none, then that takes us to notice of upcoming public meetings. And we're working our way through the 2021 budget meeting schedule. Our next meeting, which will be meeting number 3 of the Council in Budget Committee, is scheduled for, it says February 3rd. Do we not have a meeting in January? Mr. Jansen, no? February 3rd, it is 2021. And that will be the library, general levy operating budget, and assessment analysis. If there's a 4th meeting necessary for the budget, it will be held February the 10th, 2021. All budget meetings begin at 6 p.m. They are broadcast via video teleconference. The budget bylaws will be coming before council on Monday, January the 18th, 2021 for the water and wastewater budget and rates bylaw. And on Monday, February 22nd, 2021, the general levy budget bylaw and general capital budget bylaw. There is a proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment with respect to 80 to 84 and 94 Jarvis Street on Monday, January the 11th, 2021 at 6 p.m. again via video teleconference. And the information report will be available to the public on January the 6th, 2021. And then there's also a proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment public meeting scheduled for January the 11th, 2021 at 6 p.m. with respect to a property on Nye Road 0-6489. And again, that the information report for that meeting will be available January the 6th, 2021. And that meeting will be held by video teleconference starting at 6 p.m. Since the regional councillor is not available, there's no regional councillor report this evening, which takes us to presentations and delegations. And we have a delegation from Jackie Poulin, Youth Services Officer, and Jason Shawana, Executive Director, Niagara Peninsula Aboriginal Area Management Board. Mr. Davis, can you bring them into the meeting, please?
They're just coming in right now.
Is Kathy Smith with them as well?
She is, yes.
Okay. So we have Jason Shawana. I can see his face. And
Good evening.
Good evening. And I can see Kathy Smith. And Jackie, are you going to be on video as well?
Yes, there we go.
There we go. So we've got all 3 of you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Please proceed.
So good evening, Mayor Redekop and council members. We are from Niagara Peninsula Aboriginal Area Management Board. It's quite a mouthful when you answer the telephone, otherwise known in short acronym for NPAAMB. We have a bit of a PowerPoint presentation that we'll take you through this evening.
Can you see it?
We can.
Perfect.
Can you still see me?
We can still see you.
Yay! Okay, so as I said earlier, NPAAMB, Niagara Peninsula Aboriginal Area Management Board. And I'd like to welcome Jason. He's relatively new to NPAAMB as our executive director. And so we're very proud to have him with us. So miigwech, Jason. Are we stuck? Frozen?
There you go.
Ah, Here we go. Who is NPAAMB? We were established in 1992, a not-for-profit organization. NPAAMB provides skills development and training opportunities for urban Indigenous youth, those that self-identify as status, non-status, Métis, or Inuit in Southern Ontario. We attract, develop, and motivate young Indigenous talent by respecting their diverse cultural identities and working closely with the communities that we serve. NPAAMB's core values: collaboration, integrity, honesty, respect, accountability, humility. And those are the foundations, beliefs that we have in all of the programs and all of the work that we do each and every day. We remind ourselves this is what we made a commitment to in our communities, and we move forward with that with our core values every day. To the subject at hand is Opportunity Knocks. Opportunity Knocks would be our 7th annual Opportunity Knocks event. It is a career planning conference for Indigenous youth in high school from the Niagara region. Due to COVID-19, NPAAMB will host 150 to 200 youth for a virtual 3-day conference. New to NPAAMB is this virtual conference. We have always met face-to-face, generally, and we try to host it in Niagara Falls, where some of the students don't have the opportunity to travel. And so we host in Niagara Falls. We've been hosting at White Oaks Spa Resort Convention Center in the last number of years. This year, we were trying to host in Niagara Falls, closer to, well, at the Marriott there on Stanley, and you know, to have the students much more closer to our history of the waters and the area there. As you can see, we have a tentative draft agenda to get put together here. And we wanted to give the students everything that they receive when we meet face to face. And we thought, how could we best do this virtually? And to do it virtually, we have made connection with our elders who are more than willing to reach our young people virtually. And as well as our partners that we have in the skilled trades and apprenticeships. They are more than willing to be part of this virtual conference, and we're so excited to be able to put this on together. It's been a big learning curve for both Kathy and I, to say the least, in regards to virtual planning, but nonetheless, we have a pretty jam-packed agenda starting on Thursday, February 25th. And going again on Friday, February 26th in the evening, and then all day Saturday. So Saturday we have pretty much the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program. They will be doing a panel, and it's live. We have some events that are pre-recorded and some that are live due to the nature of availability of our guest speakers. We'll also be working with Skills Ontario. Skills Ontario will also be doing a skills competition with us. And what we're doing this year for virtual is we're going to equip the students with a resource box, if you will, that will have all of those things that they're required to do throughout the 3-day conference. One of the things that we're looking to do is actually doing some hands-on craft items with them. So we'll have an instructor online, and they will have their kit in their box that gets delivered to them, and they will be part of that make and take, if you will. And other things that we're working on, of course, for them is the building your brand. So RBC is one of our partners, and they're coming in to talk about financial literacy. Our NPAAMB team will talk about youth rules. So that's employment. What happens out there when you're working as a student? You have rights as a student, and we like to inform our students about that. We also have mindfulness training, you know, taking into consideration what we're going through right now with COVID-19 and being mindful of other people and where they're at in their thought process and in their mental health capacity. We'd also like to work with vision boards with our youth so that they understand what it's like to be able to put something down on paper, and then later on you watch that come to fruition. It is empowering for them, to say the least. We have summer job opportunities that we will talk to the youth about and what that means for them throughout the summer month. Maybe even the town of Fort Erie would like a summer student this year. Plug it in for NPAAMB. The other thing that we are hoping to have is a guest speaker who is an Olympian motivational speaker to talk about resiliency. And really and truly, honestly, that is, you know, what all of this virtual learning is about for us. And after that, we're going to do our closing comments and ceremony, and then we will have a round dance which will be pre-recorded at Guyana Say, and Guyana Say is located on Six Nations, and it is an actual longhouse on property. So we'll hope to have our dancers and singers in there. And that about wraps up our agenda for the 3-day event. So the goal of the conference: exposure to the opportunities and possibilities for career pathways for virtual workshops, presentation on trades and apprenticeships with a foundation of cultural components. Students will participate in interactive workshops, presentations, skills competition, and a trade show, providing laptops or tablets to the registered conference youth. That is our biggest goal. So we broke down a bit of a chart for you, and you can see the 5 different catchment areas on the right side of the screen. So we have an office located in downtown Fort Erie at 60 Jarvis across from the post office. We have office in St. Catharines, Hamilton, Brantford, and Kitchener-Waterloo. And we just gave some examples in regards to stats for our local area. So out of the past several years that NPAAMB has been operating, you can see the different numbers that for clients and intakes that we've done in the area. And we thought we would break it down to the numbers in the local high schools. And as you can see, Fort Erie is one of the larger populations of self-identified students in the area. I mean, almost as high as Niagara Falls. And it was very interesting to see that, because in each catchment area, you know, we have the roles as our youth service officer. In my role and capacity is to be able to see, like, wow, there is a large population of students that are from Port Colborne and that are also from Welland. And so that's Fort Erie catchment area. So that's my area that I get to cover with the students. So the target for the Virtual Opportunity Knox Conference is we would like at least 150 high school students. Of course, we say we're shooting for 75 to 100 local students, but across the broad area, we're looking for 150 to 200. How can you help? Allow me to take you on a journey of a typical life of a student with limited to no access and barriers in their educational and personal journey. Let's minimize barriers and maximize benefits. How incredible would it be for the town of Fort Erie to empower such students with the pride and purpose of knowing you are investing in their educational footprint? Accountability is a large factor in which we focus at NPAAMB. During the event, attendance will be monitored. Evaluations will be completed at the end of each day. An equipment loan form will be completed and uploaded into the information system. So what we'd like to do is provide everyone with a computer And that computer would be registered back to each catchment area of NPAAMB. And it goes into our information system. And that's a great way for us to be able to track our students that participate in the conference. And at the end of March, each participant will be contacted for a follow-up on their plan of action. Number one, they'll demonstrate outreach and research at least 3 employers. Demonstrate networking with at least 3 skilled tradespersons. And demonstrate the pros and cons of at least 3 apprenticeships. And at the end of the day, by the end of March, we'll be hoping to provide these young people with a laptop for their future. That about wraps up our presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I noted in your, in the list of schools, areas and students, you had Fort Erie, Crystal Beach, and Stevensville segmented out. So really, if you look at the town of Fort Erie, you're talking 160 students, 40
Yes.
of whom are high school students. So
Yes,
those
absolutely.
numbers actually far exceed every area except St. Catharines, but the number of high school students actually even exceeds St. Catharines. So that's not surprising, I don't think, to most of us who are familiar with the extent of the presence of the Indigenous community in Fort Erie. Any members of council have any questions of Ms. Poulin? Looks like you got off scot-free this evening. So it's very nice to see all of you and have a good holiday.
Thank you so much, Mayor Redekop, and thank you so much, council members.
Good luck, Jason, in your job.
Rich, thank you very much.
You're welcome. That then takes us to the consent agenda, and as we know, a couple of items have to come out. That would be 9.2.3D and 9.2.2A. Are there any other items that anyone wishes removed from the package? And Councillor Noyes, I see you're with us, at least in voice.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can hear you,
Okay, okay, I
but
don't,
we can't see you except a phone icon. So you're probably having some difficulty with your internet?
I can email back and forth, but for whatever, the Zoom's not going through, so.
Yeah, okay, well, we can hear you. So certainly, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to pipe up and we'll take into account the fact that we can't see you.
Okay, I can't raise my virtual hand because I can't see where I'm supposed to raise it, so.
Well, so are you on your iPad?
No, I'm on my phone. My iPad won't take it either.
Oh, you're on your phone. Okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, you just pipe in if there's something that you needed. And since I've got you, is there anything out of the consent agenda that you wanted removed?
No, it wasn't.
Okay. The reason we're removing 2 items is that both Councillor Dubanow and I have a conflict with 1 item each. Okay, so if there's no, oh, sorry, Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'd like to remove 9.22E, the correspondence from the city of Niagara Falls.
Sure. So Councillor Lubberts, you have the resolution with respect to the consent agenda. So could you read that minus the 3 items that we've identified? And do you have those 3 items down?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that council approves consent agenda items as recommended, except for items 2A, 3D, and 2E.
Okay, is that clear to everyone? Does anyone have any questions or comments with respect to Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious with respect to the Environmental Advisory Committee minutes from November 10th. I noticed that they didn't have a quorum and were unable to proceed. I'm just wondering, were there any issues that needed to be addressed, or was it just more of a follow-up? I'm just concerned about timelines and when they're going to be able to get back together if they didn't have a quorum last time.
Councillor Lubberts, you're a member of the committee. Has there been a meeting since then? I think there has been. Has there?
Yeah, we had a meeting last Sunday, and there will be minutes coming out of that meeting.
That answer is perfect. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? There being none, I'll call the question on the consent agenda as modified. All those in favor?
I'm agreeing.
Perfect. None opposed. That is carried. So Councillor Lubberts, could you then move forward with item 9.2.2A, please?
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that council approves of consent agenda item 2A as recommended.
It's 9.2.2A. Are there any questions or comments with respect to those minutes? If not, all those in favor? Councillor
I'm in
Noyes?
favor. I'm in favor.
Thank you. That is carried. And then item 9.2.2A, sorry, E, Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott. The council approves the consent agenda item 9.2.2E as recommended.
Councillor Dubanow, you wish to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'd actually like to move that we receive and support the correspondence from the City of Niagara Falls, and I believe to move that I would need a seconder. Is that correct, Your Worship?
Seconder. That's correct. You need a seconder.
I think it was Councillor McDermott who.
Councillor McDermott's hand is up. He's agreed to second that.
And I'd be willing to speak to the amendment I'm requesting.
Sure,
Yeah,
go ahead.
and I appreciate that, Worship. Thank you very much. I think this is important. It was almost, maybe it was exactly 1 year ago that I had the opportunity to attend a session put on by Ian DeYoung, who's a homelessness expert. And it was hosted at the Convention Center in Niagara Falls. And what a year it's been since then, where we haven't had the opportunity to do things like that. It was really interesting because it highlighted that the cause of homelessness is typically not the things we think. It's not necessarily financial. It's not necessarily addiction. It's related to trauma. And the correspondence outlines some other interesting facts regarding the number of overdoses and other issues that have occurred in Niagara last year. And with the pandemic and everything that's gone on, I think it was back in October, the Public Health Service of Canada had gleaned some information that overdoses and overdose deaths were triple where they are. There's economic consequences to this, or social consequences, which all play into the trauma that people are experiencing. And I think it's very, very timely that this is being discussed. I think it's important, and I think this is something we should support. And that's why I've requested that I've moved that we amend it to receive and support.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to speak to the mental health issue as well. I remember reading in the Toronto Star about a study that the Center for Addiction and Mental Health did that shows that these alarm bells are ringing over youth in distress and getting louder. Just some of the things, and I'm not going to be long. 1 in 7 Ontario students in grades 7 to 12 say they harmed themselves on purpose in the past year. 1 in 3 say that there was a time in the past year when they wanted to talk to someone about mental health problems, but did not know where to turn. 1 in 6 has serious thoughts about suicide. This is not a small sample at all. This is like 14,000 students province-wide that the CAMH has been a study that they put forward. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in Canada for those between the ages of 15 and 24. Just one other part. Depression amongst Canadian post-secondary students jumped to 27%, 20% prior to the outbreak. So these results are previous to COVID and can be compounded by the fact that through isolation, these things just get worse. Now, Ken Hellerman, who's the chairman of Carleton University Neuroscience Department, said that our students are like canary in a coal mine. They're emerging adults. Their brains are still developing. They're facing unique stressors. And if we don't do something about mental health as a population, we're certainly not going to do mental health with a student population. You know, Your Worship, I think you know my background. I've been involved in coaching children throughout our community for many, many years, probably thousands of kids. And I see if we don't do something about this province-wide and countrywide, we're going to lose part of the next generation to this sort of stuff. And it's not just kids. It's people that, like myself, I mean, I've had my challenges over the past little while. You know, I lost my wife 2 years ago. And then COVID came along, and I've been struggling with just being here alone. And if I didn't have a network of people that I could count on, many of them sitting around council chambers, I don't know where I'd be. So when you're a university student and you don't have your parents there, and you can't depend on maybe what they even want to help you or not, you have to think about these folks, because it's just a terrible thing for our students to be challenged like this. And I see the universities and schools have to be involved in whatever these solutions are. So I'm happy to support this and move it forward to the region. I know the region will probably have questions about this, and rightfully so. The homeless portion, I already know that the region is trying to decrease homelessness by 20%. But as you well know, Your Worship, there are like 835 people out there experiencing homelessness, 320 chronically. So it could take some time before that happens. What I'm trying to encourage the region to do, it's a call to action to basically look for funding in these three areas to continue helping these people. Because as we reduce homelessness to 20%, you know, how many have been added to the list because of COVID later on down the line? So I know this is going to be a struggle probably for the region, but I know that their heart's in the right place for Christmas time, where we should be a compassionate society. And basically, that's why I support this.
Councillor McDermott. Thank you. Thank you for those profound comments. Anyone else wish to address this particular item? Councillor Noyes, did you have any comments?
No, I don't. I support everything that's been said.
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the amended item 9.2.2E?
I'm in favor.
Opposed? None. Thank you very much. So then that takes us to 9.2.3D, and I'm going to ask Councillor Zanko to assume the chair because I have a conflict with respect to that. Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Lubberts, could you move forward with
Thank you
reading?
very much, Madam Chair. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott. The council approves consent agenda items 9.2.3D as recommended.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
I'm in favor.
Okay, that carries. And that was very easy. I will hand the chair back to you, Your Worship.
You made it look easy, Councillor Zanko. That takes us then to reports, and Councillor Zanko, you happen to have the next resolution.
I do. Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that PDS 62-2020 Licensing and Regulation Short-Term Rental Information Report. The council receives the Licensing and Regulation Short-Term Rental Information Report, which provides a review of the first year of the pilot program for information purposes.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments with respect to the report?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councillor Noyes.
Okay, thank you. In regards to that, just a comment really that I noticed in the narrative that it talked about that there were the number of complaints in the past were a bit different because the police would answer some of the calls and as opposed to the bylaw, and so they, we may not have had an accurate number of the actual incidences that occurred. And I'm just wondering, is there any plan to improve the communication back and forth? That may be why the numbers were low in the years past.
I believe that's referred to in the report, but Ms. Dolch, perhaps you could comment on that.
Sure, thank you. Through you to the councillor. That is correct. We've built a partnership now with the Niagara Regional Police, and Mr. Dubanow has been working really hard with maintaining that relationship. They are now informing us of the calls they get. They have our list of short-term rentals and the licenses we have, and they double check that list when they go out. So at this point in time, anytime they do go out, they notify us if it's a short-term rental, because we do have the demerit point system. So we are ahead, and Paul's now joined us as well, but now we're tracking this a little bit better than we have been in the past.
Councillor Noyes?
Thank you for that explanation. Can I then take from that when we get the bylaw reports that reflect the number of calls and number of complaints, that those complaints that are initiated by the police, not initiated by the police, but answered by the police would also be included in that report?
Ms. Dolch or Mr. Chidoba?
Through you to the councillor, yes, that's correct. We'll provide that information. It'll be part of our record going forward, so we'll provide that in subsequent update reports.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few questions with respect to the report. There is mention of the possibility of a municipal accommodation tax. I wonder if I could get clarification, because there's talk about that tax would then be applicable to bed and breakfasts and anybody else in that circuit. And 50% of what is collected would go to destination marketing, which would be a shared marketing program with 4 different municipalities. Is there any validity to that?
Mr. Chidoba, are you familiar with that, or should I go to Ms. Dolch?
Through the chair, in short, for the municipal accommodation tax, 2% would be distributed to tourism. But I just looking for exactly, Councillor, your question. I'm just, if I can get clarification on that.
I think she's wanting to know whether it's accurate that half of the money would be shared among other groups other than just what's in Fort Erie. That was number 2. Number 1 was that this tax would be applicable to anyone who is in the business of leasing rooms or renting out rooms. So bed and breakfast, hotels, motels.
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor, the tax that's collected by a short-term rental agency requires that 50% of that be distributed to economic tourism specific, and then the municipality would retain the other 2%.
So what about the target group? Is that everybody that's engaged in renting rooms?
Through the chair, it's also at the discretion of the municipality. So you can be selective if you want.
Okay.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you, that's fair. The other thing that I noticed that was quite interesting is the Granicus, or I don't know how to pronounce it, Granicus Host Compliance Group, and that they quoted a per unit cost of $117.76 per short-term rental based on the fee that we would put in place, the structured fee that we would place, but annually it would, based on the number, come out to about $35,682. And I just wanted to voice my concern about that. I would rather create employment for someone within the municipality and hire someone on a full-time basis and give the money to that individual to do exactly what that organization would be doing, rather than to give it to an entity that where it doesn't stay into the community. So that's my comment on that. The other question that I have is with respect to a couple of things. The possibility of scaling or creating a scale of fee structures as opposed to it being $300 all across the board or $500 all across the board, maybe $300 for one, not bed and breakfast, but one short-term rental. And then if somebody owns 2 or 3 in the municipality, it gets scaled up accordingly. That might be something to look at as well. The other thing that I wanted to mention, if I could, Your Worship, is that I wonder if 2020 is a year that's valid in terms of assessment of what's been happening in our municipality, and if we might want to monitor it just a little while longer and give us some time to let the short-term rental owners know that change is coming, so that it doesn't happen effectively January 1st of 2021, but it's a gradual, it's gradually implemented so that they're aware of what will happen, let's say January 2022. And in that case, I wonder if we could also, Your Worship, you and I had spoke about this, and maybe you can clarify it after I give it an attempt here, but we talked about ghost, and I can't remember the terminology.
Ghost hotels.
Ghost hotels. And my fear is this, that that the hotel industry has, and especially in our community, has invested quite a number of dollars in infrastructure and taxes. And the short-term rental, though they've been around for quite some time in our municipality, it's become this disruptive industry. And there are a couple of things that concern me. One, that they don't pay the property taxes that are obligatory towards corporations themselves. And since this is a business, I think that that should be looked at. Also, the fact that they have a revolving door, some of them anyway, 1 night, 2 nights, and I think that that would be best suited for the hotel industry itself. But I'm not sure, and perhaps our coordinator of bylaw could comment on that, and that could be a report that could be brought back to let us know what the effects are.
Mr. Shadova.
Through the chair, yes, Councillor, that's not a problem. Yep.
Okay. And then just 2 more things, Your Worship, really quickly. Just wanted to say it was a really good report. And I wanted to thank both Ms. Dolch and Mr. Chidoba for Ms. Dolch for initiating it in the beginning and giving us guidance, and Mr. Chidoba for taking up the torch. So thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other councillors?
Oh, Ms. Dolch had a comment, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I apologize. Thank you. Through you to the councillor. I just wanted to touch on a couple points you did raise. The first being the bylaw officer and the Granicus's costs. It is quite substantial, and I think we could get more benefit with a full-time employee that could pick up additional work and doing that both reviewing the short-term rentals, keeping an eye on monitoring the sites and things like that, rather than hire a company such as this. I think we get more bang for our buck in that regard, because we've done some research on that too. You did talk about the owner versus ownership in town and trying to do the scale on how many they own short-term rentals. The only concern I may have with that is that I think it might be difficult because you might get it for corporations, but they might create two corporations, or they might have two different names. So I'm not sure you're going to achieve what you want to achieve with that, but we can provide you maybe with some options on, I understand where you want to head, but maybe we can provide you with some options on that when Mr. Chidoba looks at that in a little more detail. In terms of the ghost hotels and assessed value, we can also have a look at that and discuss that further with the Municipal Property Tax Assessment Corporation to see if there's some ability just based on use, especially if it's permanent year-round use. That was all. Sorry, I wanted to add those points.
Councillor Butler, did you have anything arising out of any of the comments from Ms. Dolge?
Yes, just very quickly. I happen to agree with you, Ms. Dolge, and maybe that could be where the scaling of the fees to register might be an area to look at. I don't know, but thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Any other councillors? So Ms. Dolge, just to go to that last item that you commented on, we require, for purposes of our council agenda, to know who's behind a corporation. And we can certainly request that, I should think, in connection with short-term rentals. Just as I was a little surprised at the comment that some short-term renters are having difficulty proving that they own the property because title documents don't exist. Those are easily obtained. Anyone can obtain them. And if they can't get them directly through the digital facility that the government runs, they can get them by asking a lawyer to pull those documents. The other thing that I was surprised about was the comment in the report, and maybe Mr. Chidoba, you can comment on this. Sometimes property owners do not have full ownership and aren't able to provide certain information. I would have thought that when we ask, or when we get an application, that the owners would be obligated to sign on, or at least someone would have to confirm that the owners of the property are in agreement with the application. Is that not the case?
Through the chair. So, Your Worship, this information was relayed to us from the coordinator of business licensing. And with that, ultimately, it was a very few amount of cases where they were actually unable to prove ownership. And I believe it was to do with a land lease and something of that regard, a very unique circumstance. It wasn't a high amount of them, but it was a few one-offs that did occur.
It would have to be pretty rare for someone not to be able to prove that they own the property. And even if it was a lessee, they should be able to prove that they have a valid lease, I would think, and that the person that they've got the agreement with is the owner. And again, those are documents that are public records, so they should be easily obtained by the person. If there are no other questions from any other members of council, I did have some questions in relating to really the number of short-term rentals buildings which weren't licensed, and it's actually 50% according to the information that we obtained from one of the organizations that tracks these. And I'm surprised that we didn't take more steps to track those down. There may have been some HR issues in that regard. I don't know, Mr. Chidoba, was there an explanation for that?
Through the chair, just as a precursor, we were actually doing very well ahead of the curve, so to speak. Based on our consultation, where about only 10% of a municipality's short-term rentals actually licensed, and so we were looking fairly well with that regard. But having said that, our staffing levels and assignments have had a significant impact on this. In those we did have the opportunity to do a proactive, it was very, very low, but in that our success rate was very, very high. So ultimately, in short, it was a staffing level issue in that we didn't have the resources dedicated dedicated specifically to address this issue and assist the program.
So my understanding is that there will be a change in who will be managing that aspect of the operation in terms of licensing starting sometime early in the new year. Is that correct? Ms. Dolch?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct. The licensing portion will be transferred over to the Economic Division. In terms of the bylaw enforcement, it will continue to, and the monitoring will continue to be done by bylaw enforcement.
So if, and I suppose this may be something that's going to show up on the 2021 general levy, if bylaw enforcement is seeking funding for another part-time employee for that part of the year, what would the role of that individual be? Would that individual also be tracking down unlicensed short-term rentals? Because it seems like the number of complaints that we're receiving are fairly nominal, although some people think that there are lots of complaints. So would the role of any employee be to track down and get licensed some of these illegal short-term rentals?
That's correct. What would happen right now? We're, as you saw, you previously approved from May to September a bylaw officer to monitor and generally more enforcement-based activity at that point. In terms of monitoring, the problem is a lot of these sites you have to actively monitor, and that's we went through this program with Granicus where the sites change. They sometimes don't post till after 4:30. They do a number of things where you have to have somebody after hours more so monitoring this type of activity to see if you can kind of catch those people that are actually listing on different websites, and there's tons of them. In terms of the bylaw officer themselves, obviously if we would look for improvements in trying to get those licenses, and that's the goal. And in the off chance that we get to a point where we're at 80 or 90%, that bylaw officer also could do some parking, or if we get great compliance over the year, obviously we have some additional parking enforcement. As you noticed this year, we did have some assistance with parking enforcement, and we had good success with that work this year.
I guess, I don't know, maybe I should be giving up the chair to Councillor Zanko. Do you mind if I hand the chair to you? Because I'm veering away from questions and I'm getting into comments here. Yeah, it seems to me that, if we're not actively trying to get into the fold those property owners who are engaged in short-term rentals and aren't licensed, we're disadvantaging not only the legitimate hotel, motel operators, but we're also prejudicing those individuals who have registered their short-term rentals because they're abiding by the rules and regulations that we have established, and they are paying the fee that we have required them to pay. And I note that there were a number of I think there were 16 short-term rental properties that became licensed once we ascertained that they weren't licensed. But I think the number was 19. And I was wondering why the other 3 weren't picked up as well. And I'd be able to give you accurate numbers, except my iPad's acting up here. So the parts that I'd highlighted are flashing in and out. But I think those were the numbers. I think there were 19 that were ascertained as not having been registered. 16 were then licensed. And I think there were 3 that weren't accounted for.
Mr. Chibota, did you want to answer that?
Sure, through the chair. Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, the 19 number you're thinking of is 10 of the 19 complaints received penalty notices as a result of failing to register. With respect to the compliance, only 1 property after our investigation chose not to license and shut down the operation. And the rest that involved a enforcement investigation did license with.
Right, and since you're on that page, which is page 5 of the report, there's a graph that shows green 94% and red 6%. The green is supposed to be licensed with the town. The 6% is did not license. What's that graph based on, if I might, Madam Chair?
Mr. Chibota?
So through the chair, thank you, Worship. That graph is based on the 53% of the investigations, complaint and proactive, that we attended. And they were confirmed to be an unlicensed short-term rental. So with that, we received a 94% compliance rate for those that we investigated. The other 47% are complaints that were received and were either unfounded, meaning that we were able to determine it's a long-term tenancy, or that we were unable to attend for in progress to determine that it actually was operating as a short-term rental at the time.
So I'm not sure that I'm clear on that. The 6% then, which is did not license, means what?
Mr. Chibota?
Through the chair, Your Worship, that is they shut down operation and they ceased to operate as a short-term rental. So they did not license, but they no longer operated as a short-term rental.
I think it would be helpful if we had a chart as well, or a pie that showed that we have 146 registered short-term rental properties, and then 160 that aren't, that we've been apprised of. And but I guess we know that, and that 160 or thereabouts would generate, even at $300 per property, a significant sum of money, equal, actually more than what we generated with the properties that were licensed. So I'm looking at 2020 as Councillor Butler had alluded to, as somewhat of a transitional type year, really affected significantly by COVID, because we know that there are lots of people that own properties that perhaps would have registered if they had been inclined to rent their properties out, and who traditionally had. Many of those are Americans, and then there are many Americans who would have come in and would have taken advantage of short-term rentals. So that the 2020 year really doesn't give us as much information as I think we probably could use or need. We have received some letters of expression of concern. Certainly, some of them can be managed by law enforcement. And I think in the report, there was an indication that part of the problem is that when complaints are received, sometimes we don't have people that are working. And by the time we get to the complaint, the next day, as an example, the complaint may no longer exist. We'll have to, I think, figure out ways that we can manage that. In terms of hiring more people, I'd be in favor of hiring more people if I thought this would be revenue neutral. If I thought that we could actually generate the revenue to pay that person by being a bit more proactive in making sure that the units that are out there are actually being licensed. And if there were 300 properties that were operating in 2020, some of which may not if they had to pay a license fee, so I take that into account. I would guess that in 2021 there'll be a lot more, because in 2021, if in fact the vaccinations are effective and they're very widespread by May or June, I would think that there'll be a lot more economic activity. So it may very well be that we will need an employee who can help with the bylaw enforcement. But I do believe that we need to have somebody, and it doesn't have to be a person with a lot of skill, because any high school student, I'm pretty confident, could go on the internet and start telling us where the short-term rentals are. And they could give us a lot of information. Then, of course, the challenge is to track that information down. But things like, individuals setting up corporations with different names to buy properties, I think we can deal with that by requiring people to indicate who's behind a numbered corporation or a named corporation. In terms of title documents, that's, to my mind, easily resolved if it becomes a problem. And then in terms of the fee, I think the one thing that we can do is, because I don't think any of us are too concerned about the individual property owner that lives in a house and periodically will rent it out. I don't think that's a big issue. I think the concern becomes the corporate aspect of this, where we've got individuals or groups of individuals that may own 5 or 6 or more of these short-term rental properties. Sometimes they're very well managed. Sometimes those are the best managed, but those are commercial enterprises and they're being operated within our residential neighborhoods. I don't want to be looking at zoning restrictions yet. I think that's something that we look at depending on what happens in 2021. I think the accommodation tax is something that when we've got more data, we look at going forward. But I would think that in terms of fee structure, that's something that we could address now, because we know that there are property groups that have several of these as opposed to individuals or groups that only have one. So I'd be looking at some type of rate structure that would take that into account. Maybe as an example, for the first property, if you have one property, you pay the $300. If you have 2 or 3, maybe 1 or 2, you pay $300. If you have 3 or more, you pay $500. Something that would indicate that there's got to be recognition of the fact that this isn't just somebody trying to pick up a little extra income to get by. It's a commercial enterprise. So Mr. Chidoba or Ms. Dolch, sorry, Madam Chair, could you ask Ms. Dolch or Mr. Chidoba if they have any comments on that?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're the chair.
I'm listening, and I'm forgetting that I'm the chair. Mr. Chidoba, do you want to comment on that, or Ms. Dolch? I'm not sure who wants to take that question.
I have one comment, and if Paul wants to,
Sure.
Mr. Chidoba wants to jump in as well, please feel free. In terms of, and I just maybe have some questions on this. In terms of the rate structure, as I indicated before, my concern is that for example, if I'm a commercial owner and I have 2 other friends in my partnership, what I might do is register 3 separate corporations, have a separate legal agreement between us with our lawyer, so that I get around that. So each of us has 1 property each. And I'm just concerned that we're not going to maybe pick up what we're hoping to pick up. And I don't know if there's some other thoughts to that. Again, because people will try to skirt around everything that, obviously, especially when it comes to something like a MAT tax. So I'm just wondering, maybe you, Mr. Mayor Redekop, as a lawyer, if you have any thoughts on that, on how that would work if they tried to skirt around that, if there's something we can think about a bit further.
Well, they can certainly do that, and you can create all kinds of elaborate schemes. But we're talking $500 as an example. We're talking $500. So whether you pay $300 or whether you pay $500, I don't think too many people are going to be going to lawyers to create shareholders agreements, incorporate companies, and all of that just to avoid paying an extra couple $100. In my view. So it's more likely, I would think, that if they've got a corporation, they're going to be shareholders. They'd have to reveal who they are, and we can. These are things that can always be checked. So I don't know that will be as big a problem as we anticipate. It could be. Depending on how much. If we get into an accommodation tax, that could be, because if we get into something that may be financially beneficial for them to incorporate and try to spin off a number of corporations, might be worthwhile, but to incorporate costs a lot more than the cost, the difference between $300 and $500. So I don't see that happening. Those are, and when we had the delegations last year, two men that came out and spoke about the standards that they thought we should be looking at imposing, they recognize that it's a business, and they probably, as I mentioned before, probably are among the more conscientious short-term renters. So I don't know that would be that big a problem. And I would think that it's going to help us to generate the revenue we need to effectively manage this. I think we should be doing that, and making sure that we get these property owners to register and get a license. I think that's very important, because otherwise it's not a level playing field, and we're not taking up the responsibility I think that we need to.
Mm-hmm. Was there any other comments or questions?
I have a comment.
Sure. I just seen Mr. Chibota had his hand up. I think he just wanted to further comment on that. And then Councillor Noyes, I'll go to you.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, Your Worship, just as you mentioned a few things there, I wanted to touch on the business licensing coordinator had actually identified in his discussions with the property owners who were licensing that they did find the fee to be very fair, and if not, wouldn't find it problematic for an increase in that fee, so to speak. Not a huge amount. But those discussions were primarily as they were recovering the costs of their licensing fee in a matter of one night's rental or maybe even two for the remainder of the season. So that in short from the discussions, that's the information that was relayed to me about that program.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Redekop, did you have anything further before I go to Councillor Noyes?
No, I'm fine for now. I'm fine for the moment.
Okay, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Councillor Zanko. It was regarding that when we did this last year, the PDS 39-2019, we did not include inspections by fire, building, or planning staff. And I think that was one of the things we wanted to perhaps look at the end of 2020. But again, with COVID, there wasn't a lot to investigate or a lot to go on. So I don't want that lost, because I do think that fire, building, and planning staff may play an important role as we move forward.
Okay, Mr. Chibota, did you note that, or did you want to comment on
that? Through the chair, actually, if I can pass that to the director.
Sure.
Through you to the councillor. No, that's fine. We will keep an eye on that as we go through next year to see the complaint levels and the issues that arise. Obviously, with the building, planning, and fire staff, the issue is obviously workload. In terms of right now, for example, for business licenses, we do go out to each site, review each site. You know, there would have, from our previous report, we explained there could be some staffing implications to that because of staff having to go out for these as well. And it may only be a part-time thing, depending on how quickly we can get all the ones up and running and licensed, because once it's a check for a reissuance of a license, it's a bit easier, but it's the startup, which will be the hard part. Let's say, for example, we have 300 licenses. To do that in the first half of the year is tough when we have building permit applications at a record high, as well as planning applications coming in quite quickly at this point in time. And I can't speak to fire, but
if I can comment on that, thank you for that explanation. I thought it was more that the person who owns the short-term rental would have to have a fire inspection done and would have to get those things in place to be able to get a license, that those would be requirements for the license. I think we have that they have to prove they have a septic tank at their own septic that would hold the, you know, the amount, if a number of people who are going there. But again, I thought I would prefer that it's not necessarily on us, but that there be a fire inspection, but it paid for by the renter, by the short-term owner.
Ms. Dolch?
yes, and that's what I was thinking. The issue is obviously it's a fee for service. Obviously, we could maybe charge a fee for that fire inspection or building inspection. Again, right now it's factored into a business license fee when we do regular business licenses. We actually go out to the sites, planning, building, and fire, all go out to the business site to review it for compliance. So again, we don't charge a fee, it's just through the business license, but we can look at a fee for service to recover some of the costs if we need to. But I think as 2021 progresses, we'll keep an eye on the main issues. And then maybe report back a bit earlier in the season, maybe at the end of summer, to kind of give you an update on any issues we see. If there's issues related to fire concerns or building code concerns in houses or parking or any other zoning related issue, we can definitely give you some more information. This year obviously wasn't the greatest pilot because of COVID, so we didn't have a lot of data to provide you this year, but hopefully next year we'll have a bit more.
Okay, thank you, Bernadette. Thank you.
Is there any other members of council that have comments or questions? Seeing none, Councillor Mayor Redekop.
Sure, I'm wondering if we can amend the report by adding that. Because I think at this stage of the game, if we don't do anything further, this is just, we're just going forward in 2021 as we are in 2020.
Okay.
So I think I'd like to move that staff report to council at the first council and committee meeting in January 2021 with recommendations on how to effectively address ghost hotels and recommendations for a license structure based on the number of properties owned or managed by a short-term renter.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I actually have this resolution.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have handed the chair to you then.
And I should have paid more attention to that, I think. So I'm not sure if I'd like some direction from the clerk as to how to proceed.
I personally don't think it's a problem. I mean,
No, I don't either.
You've already put it on the floor and it's there.
Okay, and do we need a seconder for this amendment? Okay,
Yes.
and Councillor McDermott? Okay, are there any questions or comments with the resolution as amended? Ms. Dolch?
Thank you. If I can just talk to the timing, obviously reports for the first meeting in January are due actually this week to me. So if it could be extended a little bit, because I don't think Mr. Chidoba would have enough time to get that together.
So is I'm sorry, so the first meeting in January is actually, is it the 11th?
The 11th, but
So the-
reports are due at the end of this week to me.
So the next meeting is the regular council meeting, which is the 18th. We could put it on that agenda. Does that give you adequate time? Because I don't want this to drag too far beyond, because we're going to have people starting to register. So, I mean.
Ms. Dolch?
Thank you.
How does that work?
I think that will be fine. It is a little tight, but I know Mr. Chidoba can pull that together rather quickly.
No pressure.
Well, half of it half of it we've talked about, and it's really not a lot of research, just some recommendations about the fee structure. The other one would be the ghost hotels, and if you need more time on that, we can always extend the time when we get there. So then it would be it wouldn't be the first council committee meeting. It would be the council meeting of January the 18th.
Okay. Are there any additional comments or questions with regard to the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
That carries. So we will, are there any questions or comments with regard to the motion as amended now? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor?
I'm in favor.
That carries. And I will hand the chair back to you, Mayor Redekop.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zanko. That then takes us to new business and inquiries. And Councillor Noyes, you have a resolution with respect to the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee.
Yes, I need a seconder.
Seconded by Councillor McDermott.
Okay. Move by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that the council accepts the resignation of Bill A. Jones as the Beachcombers representative from the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee, And further, that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None
I'm in
opposed?
favor.
That is carried. Thank you, Councillor Noyes. That then takes us to the next resolution, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that Council accepts the resignation of Shirley Stoppard from the Communities in Bloom Committee, and further that Council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Dubanow, you have the next resolution.
Yes, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that Council accepts the resignation of Cynthia LaCroix from the Fort Erie Public Library Board, and further that Council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
None opposed? That is carried. And Councillor Dubanow, you have another resolution regarding the library.
Yes, I do, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott. The council accepts the resignation of Patrick Bachu from the Fort Erie Public Library Board, and further that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Questions or comments? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just very briefly, I'm going to miss Cynthia and Patrick very much. They cared about the library tremendously, and their loss will certainly be felt. I wish them all the best. Cynthia has since left Fort Erie. So is Patrick. Not only is their presence going to be missed by the library, but it's going to be missed here in the municipality as well. I just wanted to make one quick comment, and I know I think I've briefly discussed this perhaps with you, Your Worship, and some other members of council. The Public Library Board right now is undertaking a process of diversity and representation on the library board, and through some discussions, I know that council has the final say on who gets appointed to the board, but we're just wondering if perhaps we can maybe delay an appointment or anything with that regard, just to flesh out that process, or maybe other applications that go in. And it's more of a comment. I understand that this is ultimately something that council will decide, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
So, Madam Clerk, we would be advertising for candidates for these two positions?
No, we don't do that mid-year. What we do is we go back to the first call out at the beginning of the term. We do have 4 applications that are pending. We've reached out to them to ask whether they're still interested. 2 of them responded, 2 of them have not, and we're going to follow up with them again. So we have.
What if council decided that we wanted to advertise in view of the diversity and inclusion initiative that the Fort Erie Public Library has undertaken?
You could. We would have to also change the terms of reference for the library board if you want to identify a certain type of person that you want to appoint to the board.
Well, I don't know if they've got it down that fine, but I think they're looking at some diversity. I wonder if you could circulate to us what the terms of reference are, and then if any member of council wishes to bring that forward in the new year, we can do that.
Can I comment on that really quickly, Your Worship? The eventual plan is once the board goes through this process and determines how they want to proceed with that, the hope is that they would then present something to council and see if we can get council buy-in to actually formalize something in the terms of reference. We're just not at that point yet.
All right, so then it may be, and I don't know what the timeline is, but in the meantime, we can find that out, because it may be that we'll have to move forward with some appointments without delaying it too long, depending on what the circumstances are. So if we could find that out from the Fort Erie Public Library Board, and if, Madam Clerk, if you could circulate what the terms of reference are so we can see them, then maybe we can decide what we need to do. And in the meantime, there would be no recommendations coming before council in any event until the new year. Is that correct?
Right. That's right. It wouldn't have come until the regular council meeting in January.
All right, so we'll have a committee meeting before then, and we'll be able to discuss this further. Okay, thank you for bringing that forward to us. I think we have to vote on this. Is that correct? Okay. All those in favor of the motion with respect to Patrick Bayshu?
I'm in favor.
So none opposed. That is carried. Are there any other? Is there any other new business or inquiries by members of council? Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just briefly, I just want to comment on the fireworks with Santa that happened over the weekend. It was a great event. And just a quick comment, the team at Fort Erie Festival thanks the town, partners, sponsors, funders, and the amazing staff at the Fort Erie Racetrack for their accommodation and hospitality of the fireworks with Santa event held on Saturday. And personally, as a father who is dealing with the challenges right now of trying to raise a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old during the pandemic, I personally want to extend my appreciation to Stephen Pissarro, the team at Fort Erie Festivals. That includes the Underwater Recovery Unit, the Canettes, the Rotary Club, and the Fort Erie Lions for finding a way to do something for our kids. We couldn't have a parade. We all know why we can't have a parade, but as a father, it means a lot to me and my kids that we were able to find something else, and they had a tremendous time. And I wanted to take the opportunity to thank them. It meant a lot to many families right now who are faced with the challenge of the pandemic. I think it's the best alternative that's been done in the region so far. That's just my personal opinion. And I hope Fireworks with Santa becomes a regular thing, because fireworks in December, you can't complain about that.
They were certainly visible far and wide. Any other new business or inquiries? If none, then that takes us to motions, and we have a few this evening. And as soon as I get organized here. Councillor Dubanow, you have the first motion.
Yes, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Zanko, that the town of Fort Erie provide a grant to the Fort Erie Lions Club to pay for Stage 1 and Stage 2 archaeological assessments as required to proceed with the due diligence of their affordable housing apartment building in the amount of $5,152.80.
Any questions or comments? Did you want to speak to that, Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, just very briefly. I think the affordable housing issue is one that we're all familiar with. We don't have to speak to it much further. I just think as a municipality and a council, if a service club, and they're having challenges right now being able to do fundraising with the limitations of this pandemic. I think we know what the housing study said. We know what we need to do. And I think that this very, very small amount helps them tremendously. And I certainly hope council will support this, because it'll help move affordable housing forward in Fort Erie.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Dolch, what's the stage at which this development has progressed? Obviously, archaeological assessment, they're in a position where they've identified a site.
At this point in time, we haven't seen an application at this point. Obviously, they're just doing their study work in order to submit the application. So as part of pre-consultation, there are a number of studies that are required. This is one of them. A Stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment is required prior to submission. So we haven't yet seen anything formally at this point in time.
Okay, but there's obviously a site. You couldn't do an assessment without a site.
Yes, that's correct. There is a site.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion?
I'm in favor.
That is carried. Councillor Noyes, you have the next resolution. Do you have it available?
Yes, I do.
Then
And
please proceed.
I need a seconder.
Councillor Dubanow.
Okay, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dubanow, request additional egress into the Black Creek Douglastown area. Whereas the town of Fort Erie is studying the need for an additional egress in and out of the Black Creek and Douglastown neighborhoods, and whereas the option to go through the new subdivision from Black Creek Road to Netherby Road was considered in the past, however, a previous council decided against it. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the council directs staff to consider the option of going through the new subdivision off Baker Road in Netherby, Black Creek signature, as one of the possible options. And further, the council considered this as a possible option when the study is understanding that the plan of subdivision has already been approved without this egress included. I just wanted to touch base on that if I can.
You may, Councillor Noyes, but to be clear, my recollection is that the information we got when this was raised at the last meeting was that the previous council may have decided against it because the residents were opposed to it. That was my recollection.
Yes, that was that. Yes, there was a few residents that were opposed to it.
Right. Go ahead.
Okay. So again, this did come before council in the past, and a few residents were opposed to it. But I think when we saw that with Baker Road being closed and the only other option being Black Creek Road, which is a very narrow, not the greatest road to be used as a major in and out into this area. And as this area grows with more and more and more houses, I think it's going to be a big problem. I think we do need another egress. And I think taking this off the table, as opposed to having it included in the study, I think we've put $20,000 to $30,000 towards a study to find out which is the best, that if this turns out to be the best option, that council should reconsider. It may not even be possible because, again, the plan of subdivision does not include it. But I will say the two plans of subdivision prior to this did include it. The last one, it was taken off by the request of the nearby residents. And a good example of the problems that we're going to be facing is that when the Black Creek Bridge on the Parkway is going to be either repaired or replaced, there's a likelihood, I think a pretty strong likelihood, that the Black Creek Road will probably be closed for a period of time, simply so they can replace or repair the bridge, because it basically is right by the bridge. I do think it's an important that we get the egress. I don't think anybody disagrees, because that's why the council has already approved a study. And I think, to be fair, we have to include all possible options.
Thank you. Any other members of council? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to be certain that by approving this motion, we're just simply requesting that staff provide us with comment. Is that correct?
That it be considered as one of the options, and I believe that's the intent. There may be others, but Mr. Walsh, do you want to? You had spoken to this at the last meeting. Do you want to comment on this?
So to your comment, Mr. Mayor, yeah, we're looking at a number of options. This will be certainly included as one of the options.
Yeah.
Councillor Butler?
Yeah, I'm just having difficulty with it because I don't want to endorse something unless I have additional information and know what's the right move.
So the process would involve, I think, a determination as to what possible options are available. And there would have to be, before we would make a decision, there would have to be some indication as to what the logistical issues may be with respect to any option and what the costs would be. Yeah. And we've been advised with respect to this one that the plan of subdivision would have to be modified. And so there may be some logistical issues on that score, and there may be some financial implications. Councillor Noyes, I think, is wanting us to look at this because it may turn out to be possibly the cheapest and least logistically difficult option, but we don't know that. And so that's something that it would be included. Is that a fair assessment, Mr. Walsh, from your understanding? And then I'll ask Councillor Noyes to confirm that that's her. You've shaken your head. And Councillor Noyes, that's your position, is it not?
Yes, it is. And I did also want to add that it's my understanding, and Mr. Walsh can correct me if I'm wrong, that staff was not in favor of this particular option being removed in 2015, that this was an option that the town thought would probably have been a good idea.
Well, that was then and this is now. Councillor Butler, back to you.
I understand that.
Councillor Butler, back to you.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I'm going to call the question on this motion then. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Noyes.
I'm in favor.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you.
Councillor Butler, to your resolution.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott. Whereas animal welfare is the scientific assessment of an animal's physical and mental state in relation to its quality of life, including experiences in life and death. And whereas this animal welfare motion is not to be confused with the animal welfare regulations of higher government. And whereas animal welfare in the case of this motion is a term used to describe provision of needs on a municipal level. And whereas the provision of needs includes the necessities to ensure the welfare of animals, bracket provision of needs, under human control that are recognized by the Ontario SPCA, Humane Canada, the Canadian Medical Veterinary Association, and many other professional groups as the 5 freedoms and needs, which are freedom from hunger, malnutrition, and thirst by ready access to fresh water and a diet to maintain full health and vigor, freedom from fear and distress by ensuring conditions and treatment which avoid mental suffering, freedom from physical and thermal discomfort by providing an appropriate environment, including shelter and a warm, dry, comfortable, and clean resting space, including the need to be housed with or apart from other animals, freedom from pain, injury, disease, and suffering by prevention or rapid diagnosis and treatment, freedom to express normal patterns of behavior by providing sufficient space, proper facilities, and company, including adequate outside space to exercise properly and indoor space to live. And whereas auditing animal-related businesses that have been contracted through the town of Fort Erie so as to ensure they follow a set of evidence-based standards using the kindest, most humane methods under an animal welfare directive has never been established. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council affirms a commitment to a progressive animal welfare provisions of needs program as part of any ethical animal control bylaw and purchasing policy as it pertains to animal services within the scope of contractual obligations, and further, that Council directs staff to incorporate those provisions into the animal control bylaw and include it as part of the scope and or policy purpose definitions, understandings, and directives.
Councillor Butler, would you like to speak to this?
I do. You know that my stance has been pretty straightforward with respect to having appropriate bylaws in place as guidelines for not only the general public, but also for the contract entity that is awarded whenever the contract does come up. I think that from my research, well, I know from my research, I checked with other municipalities within Ontario and within Canada, BC being one of them, Stratford, Ontario being another, Grimsby being another, and looking at what their motions were with respect to animal welfare, and they all contained them to the level of this, and had the 5 freedoms, which is where I learned about the 5 freedoms. So I think it's really important. There is a movement to make sure that things are honorable when it comes to our animals, and this is just one way of making sure of that.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Lubberts.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. Just looking at the title, and the title of this resolution is a request for a new animal welfare bylaw. And in the directives, there's no mention of an animal welfare bylaw, only the provisions of needs, which is, from what I understand, it's provisions of needs is also already incorporated in animal welfare by the province, number one. And the standards of care guidelines. So I'm not seeing any actionable item to direct staff to create a new animal welfare bylaw.
That's quite correct, Councillor Lubberts, and I think that may be a reflection, and Councillor Butler can speak to this, that may be a reflection of her thought processes from the date she gave notice of motion to the date when she completed the wording of the motion. But Councillor Butler, I'll leave that to you. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, I don't understand what Councillor Lubberts is trying to get at. We don't have an animal.
Yeah, what he's saying is that the title of on the agenda, the title of the motion isn't necessarily reflective of what's contained in the motion itself. So the title of the motion is, if I can find it.
Request new animal welfare bylaw.
Request new animal welfare bylaw, and actually the operative provisions and the preamble really are directed toward the establishment of standards for the animal control bylaw. The animal control bylaw as opposed to animal welfare.
I don't know. I mean, I have animal welfare all throughout this, and I don't know what the confusion is. To be honest with you, I'm not getting it. So I'm finding it very difficult to follow where you're coming from. It's something that's needed. It's animal welfare / animal provision of needs. What's the confusion? Because the title is request new animal welfare bylaw. It is a request for a new animal welfare bylaw that's, needs to be integrated in what we have. I don't get it. So.
Well, so
clarify for me, spell it out. I don't know. Reword it for me. I don't know, but I don't get it.
I don't think there's anything that needs to be reworded. As I said, my understanding is that there may have been a change in your approach with respect to what it is you're attempting to accomplish. That is, you're looking for a standard that the municipality can expect from those it contracts with in terms of not only animal control, but any matters relative to animals. And that's not a new animal welfare bylaw. That's amendment or the creation of the new animal control bylaw. So in other words, these would be included in the animal control bylaw as opposed to a separate new animal welfare bylaw.
Well, you know what? You're quite correct. But at the last meeting where the motion came up and I was reading the motion, Councillor Lubberts made a big deal that it should be separate. So I separated it for him. So now you're saying it should be integrated and it should have been a part of. I just don't, I don't understand. I really don't. At the end of the day, this is basically an opportunity to make sure that animals are treated well. Provisions of needs is in all other bylaws, and if you want to remove welfare and go from there, then
Mayor Redekop, maybe I can explain.
Yeah, I was going to go back to you because you raised the question, and I'm trying to define what it, or I guess, yeah. Go ahead.
Basically, what I'm trying to get at, Mayor Redekop, is I think that everybody received the email from Dr. King over the weekend, and the SPCA right now is going through the process of accreditation through Humane Canada. And since the pause has been introduced to Canada or to Ontario, and that happened through a lawsuit that was brought forward saying that the SPCA, because it's a nonprofit organization, it could not follow through with, and it couldn't be delegated to the SPCA to do animal welfare cases. So the Ontario SPCA ended up dropping a lot of their programs, and they ended up dropping a lot of their support that they provided through to humane societies and SPCA. So now the SPCA is going through an accreditation program, which includes a lot of the things that are mentioned in the 5 freedoms. And so in order for the SPCA to be accredited, they would have to follow those 5 freedoms, right? So I spoke with Dr. King over the weekend about this motion.
Your Worship, can I call point of order, because this has nothing to do with the SPCA?
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the SPCA, except it currently has the animal control contract. And Councillor Lubberts, I would remind you that the scope of this motion would be to whomever might end up either contracting with the town of Fort Erie for animal control services or anything to do with animals. So it's not really specific to the SPCA. So we hear what you're saying.
Let me ask this question, Mayor Redekop. Councillor Dubanow has declared a conflict of interest because of his relationship with the SPCA on this matter.
Right.
So, and everybody's accepted that at the beginning of the meeting. So now where do we go with the conflict of interest?
As you know, every councillor is responsible for determining whether or not they have a pecuniary interest. And it's not.
Yes, they also have to state why.
Then you let me finish, and he did state why. He did state why, and he made reference to the SPCA, because this definitely would have implications for the SPCA, because it has the current contract and presumably would be seeking to apply for the new contract when the current one.
Yes, so the reason, but
Your Worship,
just finish. The reason.
Just let me finish with Councillor Lubberts.
And stuff is if you're looking for something, whoever contracts the animal control bylaw with the town of Fort Erie, that they follow the guidelines that are provided through these accreditations through Humane Canada or whatever other agency, right? Then I can see that. But this motion is titled a new animal welfare bylaw, and the first that it says that council affirms a commitment to a progressive animal welfare bracket provisions of needs program, not a animal welfare bylaw. So we're not doing anything with the bylaw. We're going to go to the provisions of needs, which in the whereas, the provisions of needs, right, is replaced. It's not an animal welfare.
Your
To
Worship.
ensure the welfare of animals, the provisions of needs, and that's what this is about. So if that's what we want to do, then the discussions that I had with Dr. King over the weekend was, why don't we just incorporate that in our new animal services contract, that whoever takes care of the animals under our animal control bylaw, that they need to be accredited by Humane Canada. And that way you not only get these 5 provisions, but you get all of the other provisions that go along with it.
That may very well be what staff will come up with when they draft the new animal control bylaw. Councillor Butler, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, a few things. First of all, Humane Canada is a voluntary program that you pay to be in association with. The SPCA, any humane services already knows about the 5 freedoms. So making a recommendation for people to join in an association is really not our place. It's not our place, just as long as they follow what we're doing. But I'm happy to change the title, Your Worship, to anything that will encourage Councillor Lubberts to vote for the substantive portion of the motion. And I'd like to ask you, Your Worship, to ask Councillor Lubberts for a suggestion to change that title.
Well, I think it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
I would suggest that what's reflective of the motion is that this is the new animal control bylaw. And you're suggesting that there be some specific provisions in that that deal directly with the care of animals.
Right.
So I don't think it's any more sophisticated than that.
It's not.
Yes, Mayor Redekop, I think that we've already gone through we've asked staff to update the animal control bylaw, and we've asked, and that's been approved. We've asked staff to update the animal services contract, which was approved. So when staff is updating the animal control bylaw and updating the contract, these are the things that can be included in those. So all you need to do is amend the animal control bylaw to include these 5 freedoms that Councillor Butler is referring to. Because Mayor Redekop, I can't support Councillor Butler bringing forward a motion for a new animal welfare bylaw, and then in the directive, the first that, we're only asking staff to provide provisions of needs. That's not an animal welfare bylaw. It's a provision of needs. It's a simple fact.
Well, there's specific reference to animal control bylaw in the second line of that first paragraph. So I think we're talking at cross purposes here. This is a motion that's in order. It's been brought forward, been moved and seconded, and you've had an opportunity to speak to it. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to the motion? If not,
I wanted to.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Noyes. Please proceed.
Okay.
I didn't see your hand.
I do want to comment that I understand where Councillor Butler is coming from and her desire to make sure the animals are well cared for, particularly if we are paying an agency to provide that care. I totally understand that, and I would imagine everyone on council wants animals to be well cared for. I just have a concern that there are so many balls in the air right now. We have already approved an animal control bylaw to be studied, or we were hiring lawyers to come up with a new contract for whoever's going to provide the service, which is also going to include the bylaw. We have what Dr. King brought up, regardless of whether it's Fort Erie or not, is that there's a certification program through the Humane Canada. I understand that it's not obligatory, but we may ask for that to be part of the contract that they be a member of. And the other thing is that pause, which kind of changed everything around, only came into existence in October 29th, 2019. So it's only been around for about a year, and it's still going through its growing phases. I have no problem with the 5 freedoms and needs, that they should be included in any bylaw, and any contract that we give out needs to have the contracting provider to ensure that those freedoms are met and would be integral to their providing of care. But I'm somewhat confused in regards to whether this is going to be an additional bylaw to the bylaw that we're coming up with in regards to the contract, or when we're explaining to them what we want, how we want them to provide the service, or what we feel should be included in the service, which I do think would include care, whether we're moving into an other bylaw that's going to be separate from and somewhat different. And I'm not clear on that. I've tried to look up the scientific assessment of animal physical and mental state in relationship to its quality of life. And if I read it, I know when I read it a few times, I'm still not quite sure what the actual definition is when it when it's referring to a scientific assessment of animals' physical and mental states. The references that I get are more for where, like when they're talking about animals that are held in groups, so to speak, and can compete for the food and things like that. So I don't know if perhaps Councillor Butler can kind of fill me in on whether we're looking at if one motion that we've done already can include all the 5 freedoms, would be one. And the other thing is, how are we going to audit this? Because part of this thing is that we're going to audit animal-related businesses that contracted through the town of Fort Erie. So who's going to do this audit?
So Councillor Noyes, for the benefit of everyone, and I presume staff, I'm looking at one animal control bylaw that's going to include a number of elements. Mr. Chidoba, you're sitting there. Is this going to be a problem with you synthesizing these various aspects of these various motions so that we've got one animal control bylaw?
Through the chair, Your Worship, it's well underway. From what I've been hearing as well, these things are being incorporated into the development of the animal welfare protection bylaw, and as discussed with the development of the new contract as well.
Okay. Councillor Butler, then the question about the audit.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thanks to Councillor Noyes's comments. First of all, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Councillor Noyes was interested in knowing who's going to be auditing these 5 freedoms and the adherence to the progressive animal welfare provisions.
Right. So here's the thing. This was supposed to be part of one bylaw. It was supposed to be incorporated into the other motion that I had prior, but it got pushed because of the terminology of animal welfare, as we all know. And really, it's just a terminology that I've been using as provision of needs. And I agree that it should be just one set, and this should be incorporated into it. But in terms of the auditing is if there are complaints that come to the municipality that are not related to an investigation that PAAMB or any other higher government organization needs to investigate, but it is reflective of our contract. This would give us the right to allow our bylaw people to go in and audit and review whether or not they're complying with our contract. And that was the intent of that.
Councillor Noyes?
Okay. I think I'm following this. Then I would suggest that since we're talking about that, we would only get involved in the auditing process if it's beyond what the powers to be already are doing, then that perhaps needs to be reflected in that. It kind of sounds like we're going to be doing a parallel audit.
No, it doesn't. And that's why I said in the whereas, this animal welfare motion is not to be confused with the animal welfare regulations of higher government. To clarify that this is nothing to do with that. This is on our level of the municipality to ensure that whoever gets the contract is compliant. And if we do receive complaints of policies and procedures being breached or contractual obligations being breached, we have the right to go in there and to audit not only the premises, but their policies and directives according to our contract.
Councillor Noyes, back to you.
Okay, I'm just trying to digest all that.
Well, right now we don't have that, Councillor Noyes. We don't have that in the existing contract, and that's where it's problematic.
Okay.
Here's my understanding, Councillor Noyes. My understanding is that if we have a contract and there are provisions in the contract and they provide for, as an example, the 5 freedoms, if there's a breach of that, that could be reported to PAAMB as an example, or any other government agency that would investigate that. If there are aspects that they're not their jurisdiction doesn't cover, but it's part of a contract. We have the ability to insist that the provisions of the contract are complied with. And that would be something that we would be able to do if this were passed and if this were part of the bylaw, just like any other provisions in the animal control bylaw. We would have the ability to insist upon compliance with the contract. And the bylaw that you circulated from the city of Niagara Falls is a perfect example of a fairly comprehensive bylaw. It could include a couple of other provisions, I think, but it's pretty comprehensive and would give the city the ability to require compliance with its provisions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mayor Redekop, for that explanation. I guess when I'm looking at this, and I think I understand what we're saying. So the first thing is we request a new animal welfare bylaw. So if I understand the discussion, we're not actually asking for a new animal welfare bylaw. We're asking that the provisions that are the 5 freedoms and needs are included in our animal control bylaw.
Right.
So does that mean then that we have to either amend this because it starts off with that we're asking for a different bylaw, or somehow roll it, rephrase it, whatever, so that it's the animal control bylaw then will reflect the 5 freedoms and needs?
So that's somewhat a follow-up of Councillor Lubberts' concern, and my suggestion would be that the title of the motion, instead of being request new animal welfare bylaw, simply be request new animal control bylaw. But I'm going to leave that to you, Councillor Butler.
But I thought we had that already.
We don't have a new animal control bylaw. What we have is staff been directed to provide us with recommendations with respect to a new animal control bylaw. This is a supplementary motion that is requesting additional provisions to be included in that new animal control bylaw that Mr. Jadova is working on.
Okay, I think I understand where this is all going, and I think I agree with this, as long as we're not going to land up with 2 bylaws. And I thought that was one of the reasons we were hiring somebody and spending a lot of money on this, to make sure that they incorporate all these different facets and look at what would make the best possible animal control bylaw. So, and I do think, and you mentioned that the Niagara Falls SPCA and Welland is a very good and pretty comprehensive. And as I said, when we were talking about the animal control bylaw and the money that we're going to spend, that this perhaps is a good wheel that we should kind of borrow and start with, as opposed to reinventing it. That's all.
Anyone else before I go back to Councillor Lubberts before a final time? Councillor Zanko?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move that we call the question.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Lubberts, you're seconding that?
No, Mayor Redekop, I'd like to speak a second time. I think it's in our rules of procedure that we can.
This will be your 3rd time. So
No,
I'm going to let,
I
before I just
I
listen.
asked a question, I was interrupted and I came back.
Just listen, before I entertain your motion, Councillor Zanko, I'm going to let Councillor Lubberts speak one last time.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Redekop. As far as, I'm sure the SPCA and everybody at the town of Fort Erie wants to make sure that the animals are receiving proper care. So the first that's in the motion is for council to affirm its commitment to an animal's needs or provisions of needs program. So first of all, I don't know that we're having a program. And from what I'm hearing now is what we're looking for, and what Councillor Butler is looking for, is to incorporate the 5 freedoms into our existing animal control bylaw. And if that's the case, I mean, I don't have a problem with that either. And I also don't have a problem if there's other things that our staff, when they're reviewing our animal control bylaw, that they could incorporate into our animal control bylaw as part of the requirements for the contract. So there's probably more than just the 5 freedoms. And if you look at the report or the application that Dr. King sent to all of us, you'll see that there are other provisions that maybe staff can include into our bylaw. So if this is just an extension of our animal control bylaw, and we can incorporate that into the motion. Right now, the motion, the directive for staff is not to amend the animal control bylaw, it's to do the provisions of needs, which we don't even know what the provisions of needs are, but we do know that there's 5 freedoms that Councillor Butler is talking about. And if that's what we want to incorporate into the bylaw, I can support that. And I think we just need to take a look at the second that, and so that it's direct staff to incorporate the 5 needs into the contract, animal services contract. I think that there will sum this all up, but the directives in the 2 that's need to tell staff what to do. Staff isn't being directed to do anything but to have provisions of needs, and we don't know what they are.
Well, you'd have to read the entire motion, Councillor Lubberts, to get that, and I'm confident that staff is capable of doing that. But Mr. Chidoba, do you feel you need more direction from the resolution that is before us?
Through the chair, your worship, no, I believe I have a good grasp as to what is being requested at this point. And there are provisions, not necessarily referred to as the 5 freedoms, but are in terms of standards of care. And those are being incorporated in terms of that headline and further other things with respect to the revision. It is all encompassing and isn't just so far as an animal control bylaw, as well as for welfare and also reviews of our other legislation currently applicable to animals in the town. It will be fully comprehensive and delivered as one package.
Just one bylaw.
Thank you. Are you finished, Councillor?
It'll be just one bylaw, right? Our animal control bylaw.
One bylaw, and I know we may have separate and divergent bylaws or different bylaws, and I would hope that when we're finished with this, as in the Niagara Falls example, this is all encompassed in one bylaw that deals with animal control. That'll make it easier for us to manage and easier for staff and easier for the residents to follow. Anything further?
I can support it if it's just one bylaw.
Okay. Anything else? Councillor Zanko, I don't think we need to call the question because it looks like everybody's had their opportunity to speak. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Councillor Noyes, are you opposed?
No, I'm in favor.
Okay, and opposed? Okay, I thought you said you could support the bylaw, the motion.
Well, I can support it, but it wasn't amended. I can't support what's written here.
I see, okay. For the record, I supported it. Okay, that takes us then to Councillor Dubanow. You have the aquifer motion.
Yeah, I do, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott. Whereas a highly vulnerable aquifer is situated below Fort Erie, Port Colborne, and Wainfleet, and whereas the city of Port Colborne has identified the aquifer in section 83 of its official plan as a source water for rural residents of its municipality, and whereas this aquifer is also important as source water for residents of Fort Erie, now therefore be it resolved that the Director of Planning and Development Services prepare a report to Council on the location of the highly vulnerable aquifer, provide a review of current regional and town planning policies, and provide recommendations and next steps for any new mapping and policies for the protection of the aquifer from susceptible threats of contamination or adverse impacts.
Thank you. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Dubanow?
Yes, I would, Your Worship, and I appreciate you earlier giving the notice and the work you've also put forward to this issue as well. This is important. When I raised the original motion regarding the Port Colborne quarry project, and again, I've mentioned this before, but I continue to mention it, the number of wells that we have in Fort Erie and the residents who rely on them for drinking water, not even just drinking water, but even water for their livestock. It's a stunning number. And to give you an example of just how vulnerable these aquifers are, my sister-in-law lives south of Ottawa. They live in a rural area. They're served by a well. When they moved into the area, the water tasted great. And something happened during a construction process. And even though the water remained safe, the taste became metallic. Now, we don't always taste things that are bad for us. Sometimes something bad can be in the water. We don't taste it at all. But it just highlights how vulnerable these sources of drinking water are. And I would hate to think, and you know, it's not to say that we shouldn't be doing anything at all, but I would hate to think that an oversight or a lapse in judgment at one particular period of time could cause an issue that affects thousands of homes in Fort Erie, and that we can't fix. There's no turning the clock back if we don't get this right. So I think it's critically important that we do it now. Because, you know, 50 years, 100 years from now, I would hate to say that the aquifer got contaminated. Well, 100 years from now, I probably won't be here. But 50 years from now, you know, I would hate to say we had an opportunity to do something and, you know, we just didn't do it. And that's why we have all these cisterns now. And we've had to pay for the infrastructure costs of running water pipes. And I just think this is super important. And I thank you, Your Worship, as well for understanding the seriousness, as well as all of council. And I hope we can do what we have to do to protect our residents and something as precious as drinking water. Thank you, Your Worship, for giving me the opportunity to speak to this.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion? If not, then I'll call the question. All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
That is unanimous. Thank you. So are there any, that takes us to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, I seem to be on the hot seat tonight, Your Worship. I have two, actually. The first is to amend the fence bylaw to change the requirements with respect to privacy screen installations. And the second is to request the Minister of Municipal Affairs amend the Municipal Act to enhance the powers of the Integrity Commissioner with respect to egregious code of conduct violations by members of a municipal council. And those will be returnable at our first January regular council meeting.
Thank you.
Hi. Oh, hello?
Yes, Councillor Noyes?
I lost you guys there for a second. Yes, I have a notice of motion that we review the sign bylaw to allow residents to place signs on their own property without permit or fee in regards to freedom of expression.
Okay.
You can come back.
Right. And when you do that, maybe give some thought to size of the sign, that type of thing.
Yes. Okay.
And that's also in January?
It can be February. It can be
Okay.
January. I don't know
Well,
if this.
So the January meeting is January the 18th. The
Oh,
February,
that's okay.
February meeting is the 22nd.
I think the 18th should be fine. I can always delay it if it's not ready.
Correct. Okay. Any other notices of motion? If not, then we're going to be going into closed session. And Madam Clerk, I guess we want to do that before we go to the bylaws.
Yes, Your Worship, and you need to ask the councillors if they are alone and not recording.
I'll do that if we vote in favor of going into closed session, correct? So Councillor McDermott, you have the motion that would allow us to go into closed session. Could you read that, please?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler. The council does now go into closed session at, I don't have a clock up here,
It's 8:10.
at 8:10 PM to discuss the following. A, pursuant to section 239 2D of the Municipal Act 2001, labor relations or employee negotiations via memorandum of agreement with the Canadian Union of Public Employees and its local 714 and B management supervisory and exempt employee salary administration plan.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
So that's none opposed. Okay, so before we go into closed session, I have to ask each of you, and I'll ask you based on how you appear on my screen, to confirm that you are alone and that you are not recording this closed session meeting. Councillor Zanko?
Yes, Your Worship, I am alone and I am not recording this meeting.
Councillor Butler?
Yes, Your Worship, I am alone and not recording this meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Lubberts?
Yes, Mayor Redekop, I'm alone and I'm not recording this meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Dubanow?
Yes, Your Worship, I confirm I'm alone and not recording the meeting.
Councillor McDermott?
I am alone and I am not recording the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Noyes?
I am alone. I am not recording the meeting.
How do we know we can't see you?
That's where trust comes in. That's where trust comes in.
Okay, I guess I've known you long enough. I suppose I can trust you. Madam Clerk, then we're in a position to go into closed session. So Mr. Davis, you'll take care of that?
I will. I'm going to send everybody to a separate room, virtual room right now or for the next few minutes.
Don't lose me.
Mayor Redekop, can we take a 2-minute break while Mr. Davis is doing that?
We can do that. And so it's 8:12 right now. We'll come back at 8:15.
Perfect, thank you.
Hmm.
I guess we're not in the breakout room anymore.
Yeah, sorry, folks. I just have to add Tammy Morden into the room, and I had to close down the room to actually add her back in. So I'm just going to bring her back into the closed session now.
Okay.
So I think we're back in open session.
Okay, I can hear you guys. So I'm
Yep,
assuming you
we're
can
back
hear
in,
me.
we're back in session. So Councillor Zanko, you now have the resolution. It's now 8:49.
Yes, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Dubanow, that council does now rise and reconvene from closed session at 8:50 p.m. with report that council approves and ratifies the memorandum of agreement with the Canadian Union of Public Employees and its local number 714, and further that council approves the amended management, supervisory, and exempt employee salary administration plan.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
Council- None opposed, that is carried. Thank you, and thank you to both staff and the union group for negotiating that agreement. Okay, that then takes us to bylaws. Are there any bylaws that anyone wishes removed from the package? If not, then Councillor Noyes, you have the resolution for first and second reading of the bylaw package.
Yes, I do. I need a seconder.
You have Councillor Zanko.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zanko. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Zanko that the bylaw package containing 120-2020 to amend Council's Rules of Procedure bylaw number 36-2016 as amended in brackets meeting schedule, 121-2020 to authorize the ratification of a memorandum of agreement with the Canadian Union of Public Employees and its local number 714, and to repeal bylaw number 47-2017. 122-2020 to amend the management, supervisory, and exempt employee salary administration plan, bylaw number 54-2017. Bylaw 123-2020 to amend fees and charges, bylaw number 49-09 as amended, in brackets 2020 review. Bylaw number 124-2020 to amend zoning bylaw number 129-20 housekeeping amendment. Bylaw 129-2020 to enact an amendment to the official plan adopted by bylaw number 150-6 to the town of Dairy planning area. Amendment number 47. Mike and Mary Ellen Grummett. Owners Mike Grummett Jr., agent 2776 Stevensville Road. Bylaw 126-2020 to amend zoning bylaw number 129-90. Mike Grummett Jr., agent Mike and Mary Ellen Grummett, owner 2776 Stevensville Road. 127-2020 to adopt a preliminary capital budget for the town of Port Erie for the year 2021. And bylaw number 128-2020 to amend zoning bylaw number 129-90, 1912 Kenwood Street, Matthew and Mary Silver owners. Be given, oh, I don't have the last, be given
First and second reading.
second reading.
All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
None opposed. So that bylaw package is on the floor for any questions or comments. If there are none, then I'm going to go to third and final reading. Councillor McDermott, you have that resolution.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler. The bylaws 120-2020, 121-2020, 122-2020, 123-2020, 124-2020, 125-2020, 126-2020, 127-2020, 128-2020, 129-2020, and 130-2020 are given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor?
I'm in favor.
None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Zanko, you have the confirmatory bylaw for first and second reading.
Yes, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that bylaw number 131-2020 to confirm the actions of council at its council in budget committee meeting number 1 held on November 18th, 2020, council and committee meeting held on December 7th, 2020, council and budget committee meeting Number 2, held on December 9th, 2020, and council meeting held on December 14th, 2020, is given first and second reading.
All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
Thank you. And Councillor Butler, you have third and final reading for the confirmatory bylaw.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that bylaw number 131-2020 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and clerk under the corporate seal.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor?
I'm in favor.
None opposed. That is carried. That takes us to scheduling of meetings. Any meetings that anyone wishes to announce? I can say that there's a Fort Erie Broadband Task Force meeting tomorrow, December 15th at 1 p.m. There's a Fort Erie Diversity and Inclusion Coalition meeting on Wednesday, December 16th at 2 p.m. And there is a Ridgeway Legion Child Gift Drive giveaway drive-through on Saturday, December the 19th. I think that's between noon and 2 p.m. And you may want to contact the Ridgeway Legion for particulars of that, or check their Facebook page. Are there any other meetings that anyone wishes to announce? Then if not, I'm going to declare the final final Town of Fort Erie Council meeting of 2020 over, and wish all of you a very Merry Christmas and a safe and prosperous holiday and New Year.
You too.
Good night, everyone. Thank
You too.
Do we have an adjournment motion, Your Worship?
Oh,
You wouldn't want to leave that out.
You said regional council there, so I mean, you know, I could be
it's way
different.
too early for regional council. This would be, we would just be getting over the preliminary objections at 8:56.
That sounds about right, Your Worship.
Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Butler, that council adjourns at 8:56 p.m. to reconvene into a regular meeting of council on January 18th, 2021.
All those in favor?
I'm in
That is-
favor.
That is unanimous. Thank you
Merry
all.
Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.